Kaimere is a distant planet. It is defined by waves of life brought from Earth and set free to evolve independently in this new context. The indigenous life of the planet, swarms of microbes called magic by the people who live there, are what harvest Earth organisms and make copies on Kaimere. As the asteroid which concluded the Mesozoic never struck Kaimere, dinosaurs remain the dominant terrestrial megafauna. 1.5 million years ago, a golden age of stability called the Anchored Period came to an end. As the axial tilt of the planet led to reduced seasons, warm regions got hotter and cold regions got colder. This change in status quo led to many extinctions, harvests brought new flora and fauna. Among the success stories of the grasslands of both continents were several bovines, or wild cattle. One of these was a wild cattle of debated species. It was earlier than the generally accepted and confirmed earliest Indian Orox remains, but likely still a member of the species or a transitional taxon. Regardless of specifics, it was a tropical grazer of grassland and mosaic forest. In Kaimere, it was introduced at a time of great transition and upheaval. While the planet does not have the abundance and diversity of grassland as we do on Earth, since the open terrain is not only less abundant in the hotter and more humid climate, favoring forests, but it also competes with more aggressive fern and horsetail prairies than we have here. There is still, however, territory for it to call home. Though several species evolved from this stock, only two remain in modern times: the Nikari and Arvelith Orox. Nikari wild cattle range throughout the southern Nikar with two subspecies, one in the crescent and the other in the forests west of the known world. There was once a third population in the northern prairies, but it seems they were one of many casualties as Hausi grass took over. Now the crescent Orox is restricted to more humid grasslands, where Hausi grass is not as dominant. In this habitat they form very large herds. The forests of the crescent are the last holdout of the Gar, which tend to exclude Orox due to the former's greater size. Grass isn't common in the jungle, so competition for it can be quite fierce. As Gar are extinct in western Nikar, the forest subspecies of Nikari Orox enjoys far greater success in this niche. Forest Orox live in smaller herds, but otherwise are quite similar to their southeastern grassland cousins. Cows and bulls are both brown, though bulls tend to be notably darker. The Arvelith Orox, or wild cattle, is most abundant in mosaic forests of southern Arvel. The grasslands of these hilly steppes are home to the Arvelith bison, which, like the Gar, are the dominant bovine in this habitat. Arvelith Orox, therefore, stick to the wooded areas. They live in fairly small herds, led by an old cow and defended by a single bull. This bull is quite aggressive and territorial, taking the fight to a wide range of predators and other threats, though of course his ire is most fiercely directed at other bulls. Both species of Orox have been domesticated, respectively by the southern Arvelith and Telmead of the Crescent. The Telmead have tame populations of both water buffalo and gar, but the domesticated Orox is by far the most abundant and favored large domesticate in the Crescent. A similar story unfolds with the Arvelith cattle. Especially in southern Arvel, cattle are quite common and important to the welfare of settlements. 3,000 years ago, the Free States traded with peoples of Earth. Taurine cattle were introduced to Kaimere at this time. Though they were descended from European Orox, they looked and behaved quite similar to the tempered Arvelith Orox. Many breeds were made of crossing these two, and the cattle of modern Qajar and the Free States are a blend of European and Arvelith temperate stock. In Qajar, during the Dark Ages, cavalry was most fought on the backs of horses, though elite forces rode on giant camels called Gatul. However, A favored tactic of breaking enemy formations was on the back of large cattle or war bulls. Compared to camels and horses, cattle are short-legged and broad-chested. This makes them very powerful, but impractical as mounts on a purely physiological basis. They can be quite fast, but cannot maintain appreciable speeds for long, and are not comfortable to ride on for long either, due to their width. Factor in that most are too ornery of temperament for riding, and it's easy to see why they aren't commonly ridden. Also, they need to mostly eat grass, so many places in Kaimere cannot support them, although this is also an issue for horses and camel. All this means that while bulls have application in disrupting formations of enemy soldiers, the routing is done by light cavalry on horseback, and some generals prefer large horses over bulls because it's more versatile. However, one cannot deny that, in application of breaking a line, nothing does the job quite as well as a few charging bulls. The occasional application of a few dozen bulls won many battles during this period. The consolidation era of Qajarith's history saw numerous changes to tactics. Mammoths were brought in from Arvel by Orox. Though mammoths were of formidable size and won many battles early on, they are skittish and slow to reproduce, and it doesn't take long for them to become little more than ceremonial and niche in application in the later years of consolidation. At the recommendation of his officers, Orox found new use for his war bulls, though, by having them breed with Nikari forest aurochs. As tropical animals, Nikari aurochs are built to shed heat. This means that not only do they have dewlaps and longer legs to make their surface area to mass ratio more favorable, they are generally more narrow animals. Breeding these narrow and long-legged cattle with the robust native bulls made for an animal that still had a lot of staying power, but was more comfortable to ride and able to run faster and longer. These new war bulls proved to be the preferred formation breaker in the later years of the conflict. Though Qajarith today has its share of conflicts abroad and in coastal defense, war bulls now have little modern application. Horses are much faster and cheaper to use to get around in the Blackfish skirmish raids of the southern coast, and Trocatul, being able to subsist on more browsing and eating ferns, makes them far more practical in defense of their logging and mining operations in northern Arvel. Breeding and training these bulls and their riders now is relegated to ceremony and sport. Several mercenary companies still train them for armed conflict, but the Senate no longer maintained bull riders for war. If war does come to Qajar, it would almost certainly be a naval conflict, not on Qajarith soil. However, if it does, the bull riders will be ready, and the Senate will have no choice but to open the coffers and let the mercenaries name their price. Cheers to Austin for sponsoring this episode. As many of you know, I've been doing a lot of art for Austin's channel, Paleo Zookeeper Association. He is a zookeeper who makes episodes about the speculative care, keeping, and rewilding of extinct animals. His episode on T-Rex has gotten a lot of deserved attention, but of course the Mammoth, Smilodon, and most recent Daeodon episodes and others are fantastic as well. I most love doing the art for his Piscobalina episode. The idea of a baleen whale small enough and of favorable temperament to be comfortably displayed made for a lot of really fun pieces that feel surreal, considering how large we're used to these whales being, and the fact that they used to be the archetypical baleen whale underscores just how strange and special modern whales are in the context of their evolution in a cooling world. This is definitely a channel you will not want to miss. Thanks again to Austin, to my Patreon patrons for your sponsoring Kaimere, and thank you for watching. Cheers, folks!